Hey guys, another week has almost gone by, and here I am doing another books I've read another week. So let's get started. But one of the books I've read today or this week was a book called Boring Girls by Sarah Taylor. Now this is about a young girl who's in the middle of, who's about to start in high school, and then all of a sudden, like she's being bullied by this random girl and then she's walking around town, and then she discovers this heavy metal, or pretty much metal music, this hardcore metal music, and she's afraid of it at first, but then like she begins to like get into it because the lyrics, however over the top it is, and it can be, like sometimes I just roll my eyes at the lyrics, but I don't know if that's the case in real time, in like real songs. But she slowly gets into it. She starts dressing like she's into metal. She actually meets a friend. Well, she actually had a friend beforehand who's a really nice girl. Um, but she actually meets somebody else who understands this music and who's dressing like she's into the scene, and then eventually they start a band, and like they begin it begins to go fine at first, but then something happens, and that's when like the plot really gets going for me. Like it's pretty much like her friend, and two other people starting this band, and they want to make it big. And this is what my third time ever reading this book because I found it through Goodreads, and it's actually a really fascinating book. Like, here's the thing: like when she begins to start in high school, like the beginning of the book, it's kind of like like she's kind of like it's high school, and it's high school, and people in high school usually complain about what's going on, how come they're not understood properly, and then there's this music which other people don't get, but she's like, oh, you don't get this, like you don't understand me, and then she finds this close friendship, and I get it. Like if I were in high school, like if this came out when I was in high school, I would totally get it. Like being misunderstood. Like her teachers are like, she's a fantastic writer. Apparently, she's a good writer. Her teacher actually says that she is, but she has to like she goes really into dark territory, like using metaphors about like murder and blood and all that. And I totally get it from both sides of view. Like I get the main character because she's an outcast and she finds this kinship with this other girl, and I get the adults because she's like, okay, like you're going a little too far. Like we don't get it. We know you're expressing yourself, and again, she's expressing herself, and I totally get why she's expressing herself because she doesn't like fit into a lot of things. And eventually, it's like, yeah, it's fine. But like I said, like I have kind of the same problems with the first last times I read this. Like the first, like again, not in high school anymore. I totally understand, but like the first part is like, it's okay. But then when like she starts getting into a band, like, and she starts writing lyrics, she's like, okay, it's not the lyrics aren't perfect. They're kind of cringy at times, but it's like, yeah, I kind of get it. And then when the plot gets going, like, I don't want to spoil anything, but when the plot actually gets going, like something happens, and it's just like a tipping off point, and it's totally fine. It becomes like totally readable to me. And again, like if you're into music and all that, like it's actually a really damn decent book. Like if you can get if you can get past like the first part, like the high school part, it's like, yeah, it's okay. It's pretty much a coming of age book, but it's like, yeah, I understand what she's going through, but it's like just keep reading, and you'll see her kind of pretty much develop, and it actually becomes pretty decent. And like it goes in when it comes to the plot, when the plot finally gets kicked off, like it gets full swing. It totally kind of becomes batshit insane. Like it's funny, it's sad, and it's insane. Like the last 10 pages of this book are insane. Like I'm I don't know if like this came out in 2015 or 2014, but I'm glad that so far from what I hear or what I'm not hearing, there's no sequel. So I'm glad this is a standalone book, a standalone book. But I totally recommend this because if you like music and you actually want to see it go to the nth degree in some way, shape, or form, I recommend this book. It took me like a couple of days to read, but again, when you read it a third time, it kind of goes like when I like me when I read it, it went by really quick. Again, although again I'd had a few problems like I did before, but I recommend this for any music fan. Yeah, yeah, it's fine. It's actually a really good book. And another book I've read, which is like a graphic novel, is A Quiet Girl in a Noisy World, an Introvert Study by Debbie Tongue. Now this is like what is it? It's a graphic novel or a bit of a comic book, or yeah, it's pretty much yeah, illustration comic book, and it pretty much centers around this young lady who's in college, and she's pretty much introverted, and she's been introverted for a long time, and even when as a little girl, like she's creative and all that, but she'd rather be out. If she's outside, she'd rather just sit alone and read instead of playing with the other kids, and she'd rather just not say anything in class. Like her teacher said to her parents, "Okay, she's doing really well in class. It's just that she doesn't talk a lot." And apparently that's a problem. And I'm like, yeah, I totally get this. And then when she goes to college, like she has like the things that introverts actually have, like burnout, like they have to recharge the batteries, they want to study alone, they'd rather just stay at home, and socializing with people kind of like tends to like burn them out a little bit. And like as a not completely introvert, but probably an ambivert more like it. But again, I'd rather just stay home a lot of the time. I really enjoyed this book because it hits all the points that I kind of go through a lot. Because like yeah, like it's funny, it's sad, and you like if you're an introvert, you totally get where she's coming from. Like she finally actually ends up with a boyfriend who's extroverted, and they actually have interesting trade-offs because she knows when to like she is getting like he gets her to socialize a little bit, like getting out of there a little bit, while he understands her needs to just stay home sometimes, and it's like an interesting trade-off because um again like it's pretty much kind of like real life, and they work off of each other really well, and they're there for each other. They give each other shit, and it's pretty much like a lot of people who are introverts who want to meet that person who understands them, and like that's kind of what I like about this. Like again, for anyone, like introverted or extroverted, mostly introverted, like introverted to see like how they like to read about how they feel, and extroverted like how they feel and how they can like handle people who are introverted. Yeah, this is actually a strong recommend. It's a comic book. It's over 150 pages, and I'm sure I'll read it again probably later this year because this is what my fourth time ever reading this, and I just happen to like. I actually even no matter how many times I read it, it's always surprising. I find a surprise every time, you know. So yeah, uh, read this and you'll be pleasantly surprised. And another book I've read is a book that I just happened to like come across last year, and it's a book called Tranny. I don't want to say, I shouldn't have said it. Confessions of Punk Rock's Most Infamous Anarchist Seller by Laura Jane Grace. And I don't know how I knew about her. Um, shoot, I knew who Against Me was. I just didn't know about her. I just like, oh my god, I don't even remember. But long story short, this is pretty much her book, and like, she's talking about how, like, even at a young age, she actually had body dysmorphia, and she struggled with it for a long, long, long time, and she talked about how music affected her, like how she became like she got into punk music and how she started writing songs and how she grew out of the whole punk as a goofy, comedic antic and more like an angry, aggressive stance. And then she talks about how she grows up and how like she like during her adolescent years and her adult years, she started like going into like her dysmorphia is getting worse. Like she's dating somebody, but like she's like, okay, I'm going to stop dressing like a woman because I want to be like a man for like whatever children I end up getting. And it turns and like it kind of gets worse. Like she starts like writing songs and she's like, oh, like it's just stream of consciousness. Like it's nothing really. And it's actually a really beautiful book because like she talks about her struggles through like her own words in the book and the journal she's written. Like this is mostly her memoir, but she actually inserts her journal entries here, and she talks about like how like her band, their rise, their success, how screwed up they ended up being, like to the point where they almost broke up and they started hating each other. And then like is um, when she finally embraces her full self, like a full grown woman, it's actually like fantastic. It's fantastically written. It's hard. It comes with its fair share of hardship, sure, but she struggles. She okay okay. She struggle she struggles with her self identity, and it kind of she goes into great detail about how she's feeling, how she doesn't feel like she's up to it, and like it kind of like I didn't know much about like the transgender community, but how she describes it, it's like there's a lot of support, but at the same time it's really hard for many people to understand unless like there it gets talked about. And like this book, it just shows like she goes through. I don't want to say brave because if I do, that's gonna sound so cliched. But it's just more like I say she's strong and she's charismatic, even if she's a bit of an asshole sometimes. Like she describes herself as an asshole at some points of the book. Like she's describing like she finds love and she doesn't know what to do with herself because like inside, like she's fighting. On the outside, she's fine, but on the inside, she's like struggling with her self identity. And in some ways, I totally get it. Like I was born a guy and I'm staying a guy for as much as I know. Um, but even if you don't get her like struggles with like body dysmorphia, you totally get her like her self identity issues. And like some everybody has that self identity issue, and I recommend this book to everybody because yeah, it's a lot of hard work and she struggles hard and she takes like she hate at some point she just hates herself, or a lot of the time she hates herself. But I'd recommend this book because no matter it shows that no matter how hard you struggle, no matter how many obstacles get in your way, you will most likely get your happy ending. Like not everybody has a happy ending, but you can work for it. And she worked hard to get her happy ending, and like this book proves that she's made it all the way through in terms of getting to where she is now. And uh, yes, there are struggles, like in some places, but at the same time, it's just a beautiful book with a butterfly, beautiful book that ends like a butterfly coming out of its cocoon. If you haven't read it, I recommend this. Like so far, I'm recommending a lot, but you know, this is my third time reading it. No, second time reading it, and okay, I've read this. I don't know. I've read this more than once, but I totally recommend it. And there are some things you miss in the first time, second time. No, there are some things if you read it again, if there's some things you read and check up the second time that you probably missed the first time, like I did. So again, I recommend Laura Jane Grace's memoir or biography. Yeah, I recommend this. And another book I've read is a book called "Homie, Don't Play That," and it's by David Pessner, and it talks about the show in living color, like the whole history with it. Like I I bought this book mostly because I was kind of an In Living Color fan, like a little bit. Like I remember in the Rogers Video magazine, back when Rogers Video was still carrying out DVDs and VHSs, I used to have these mini magazines which actually had like new DVD releases monthly, and they had this magazine, this mini one where it's like new releases and mini biographies of certain actors. So it's like 1 month could be Heath Ledger, and it's just his mini biography, and then some films he was in. But one time I ended up just coming across a DVD of In Living Color, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And I found out that Jim Carrey was in it. I'm like, okay, and it's like Damon Wayans and the Wayans brothers. Like, oh, okay, and is this new? It's like, no, this is from the early 90s. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then eventually, when I was in the fifth grade, I found out like on the Comedy Network they would show reruns, and I'm like, okay. And then I every day at around 4, I just go into my parents' room when they're not home and just watch the show, and I ended up really enjoying it. And then like I kind of dropped off because there was only so many reruns I could take, and I picked back up like when YouTube hit, and Fire Marshal Bill and whatever, where Jim Carrey's playing it. And eventually, one day, I just went to the Indigo bookstore and I saw this book. I'm like, oh, it's a full-on biography, like of In Living Color. It talks about like the Wayans family, like from when Dan Wayans was born, his siblings, like how poor they pretty much were. Like they were kind of the poorest of poor in terms of like how they lived back then. And they were talking about like racial tensions, like Martin Luther King getting shot, Malcolm X getting shot, and it talks about like how they band together, the siblings just band together and like not only protected each other but made fun of each other, like making each other laugh, and then eventually like the leader, Keenan Ivory Wayans actually wanted to like do comedy or do something with his life. So it's like, okay, let's just. He worked really hard. He worked in stand up. He actually had some bit parts, and then eventually like he became a filmmaker. And in fact, I think that film became "I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker," and that was a massive hit. Like I didn't know, I thought it was gonna be like, it's gonna be an okay hit, but apparently that was a massive hit to the point where people were like, oh, okay, what's this guy doing? And then eventually, like through some sketches here and there, in terms of like what he does with friends, and he ended up making this like sketch comedy series called In Living Color, and he got all these people like Jim Carrey, David Allen Greer, Kelly Caulfield, and Tommy Davidson. He gets a lot of these people, including his brothers, and the book talks about like how the show ran for 5 seasons and the struggles with censorship, the struggle with salaries when the show got popular, and the seasonal ride it got after Keenan Ivory left. And this is actually a fascinating book if you are into it, because it's like, okay, it might have been fun all the time. Like it might have been fun to watch like all the time, but then when you see the behind the scenes issues, it's like, okay, so like it's pretty much like a weekly thing. We're struggling for ideas. We're kind of running out. The censors are just getting at us to the point where several people left over the time. Like there were writing changeovers, like as you do, but like after the third season, it just got worse. Like here's the thing. This book pretty much proves like the first 3 seasons are solid, and then when Keenan Ivory Wayans left, it's like it's okay, but it just kind of like went downhill. And then I never thought I would say this, but when all the Wayanses left, it just became a good sketch show. Like the reason why the show was so good in the first place apparently was because it was pretty much a mostly pretty much satirical nature on the black community. And there are some white people there, like again Jim Carrey and Kelly Caulfield. but it was a unique blend of satire. It was silly, yeah, but it actually subverted a lot of things. Like it was accused of like playing blackface at times, but it's actually a pretty damn decent book. No, a pretty damn decent show that it tried hard to skew away from Saturday Night Live because they're like, oh, Saturday Night Live's not that good anymore, so we're just gonna make its own thing. And then when the Waynes' involvement got less and less, it just became a good sketch show. That's pretty much it. It just became a good sketch show, which is fun for a regular schmegular sketch show. But you know, for In Living Color, that's the worst it could be. Like it pushed the boundaries, it pushed envelopes all over, and then it's just like it didn't go as good as it was. Like it started strong, but it ended pretty poorly or pretty okay in terms of sketch comedy. So, and then it talks about like its influences, how it influences other things like Key and Peele and Chappelle Show and the Chris Rock Show, and pretty. I think Mad TV, to some extent, like it took some pot shots to things that are popular, like what was it called? Oh man, Arsenio Hall Show. Even though they're friends, and they kind of got caused a lot of tension, but they got cool with it because they were. It was one of those shows that didn't take a pot shot of anybody, that didn't leave anybody out, and it's like yeah, that's okay. So yeah, I recommend. I don't know, but I know I spoiled this, but I recommend this book. Even though, even though sometimes it's like, oh, I get the racial thing, but it didn't need an entire chapter about it or an entire section. But I get why it's in there. Like it helps the writing of the show. It shows like how the current events help like make the show episode to episode, and I feel like it's actually a pretty damn good book. Like I didn't realize how actually influential. I thought it was going to be a silly show when before I started reading this, but like reading this, it's like, yeah, this was really influential apparently, and it's like, okay, that's fine. Like, shows you what I know, right? So yeah, I recommend this. Even though I don't, whatever you think of the Waynes is now, and I think less of them because of the movies they made, I think that this is actually a good thing to um, read when the Wayans were actually really good. Like again, they were silly, but they were on point a lot of the time before like the silliness just went into full blown parody. That's not very funny. But this book is fine for like a very good portion running sketch comedy show. It actually talks like seriously about like what happened behind the scenes and the different people that were with it or against it, even the actors, the actresses, the censors, the network. And again, it's funny, it's heartwarming, and you can see like it comes from a place of love, even though sometimes it can get very ugly. And yeah, again, recommended. And the last book I want to talk about is something that has helped a little bit, and it's called Creative Quest by Questlove. And I don't know how to describe it much, and it's just Questlove. If you don't know who it is the drummer for the band The Roots, and I've known about The Roots since The Tipping Point, which he says himself says, yeah, I could see what's wrong with that album. Like I personally only know two songs, which is from that album, which is Web and Don't Say Nothing. Because I used to listen to those two songs a lot when I went to the mall when that was just on CD and you could listen to it back then. But it talks like again, Roots, the tipping point, so 2005. So he talks about create like being creative in terms of like whatever you want to do, like whether it's like being bored, like letting yourself just be bored and then something will come to you, or just working on it hard. Like it actually is an influential book for anybody who wants to do anything creative, like not be on a standstill of like working at a warehouse, just like doing something creative, like writing or drawing or even like anything creative or making music. And it shows that even the best people have struggles in terms of creativity. Like they can push themselves, but it's just not working for them. And like this thing right here, this bass guitar, like I didn't know how to like do much of anything, like create my own like bass line or bass chord or whatever, and neither was like writing. Like I talked about my envy and how I'm writing, and this book actually kind of pretty much helped me like write more. I read this last year, and it actually helped me a lot more in terms of making videos and trying to get things out there like creatively, like clockwork, like thinking about things. And this book actually helped me like think that you could just let go of some things and just not focus as hard, and the ideas will come to you. And like there's one prominent example, like it actually talks about success and failure, and like some people are like, what, like you're creating something very hard and not many people get out there, and it's like, oh, it's okay, like it's not an exact failure. But we all want that success, everybody wants success, but everybody has that failure, even successful people. Again, not many people like The Roots is the tipping point, but then they brought it back with their other albums, and then they got creative when they joined that Jimmy Fallon talk show, which is still on as of right now, and they got more creative, and like they're forced to be creative on the spot because they want to work things out, like musical cues of like you know the host jokes, and the musical cues of the guests walking out or walking in, or like pretty much sketch ideas. And like they're on a roller coaster of creativity because of that show in terms of music and sketch. But this, like it one of my favorite two of my favorite things it just talks about is like, again, success and failure. And like everybody has a failure in their life, and it's like, okay, you can release something and nobody's watching, and it's like you're depressed because nobody's watching, and it's like, I failed, but it's like, no, you didn't fail. It's just that no, not everything you do will land in the middle of a receptive audience. Just let it be there, and then keep creating. Like just because it's good now, just because it's ignored now, doesn't mean along the line, down the line, you won't it won't be seen. It won't not be seen. It's actually really tough to be successful at a lot of things. And people will actually keep saying, maybe it's fine. Like, I want success now. It's like, no, it takes time. And I totally get why, like, because I want to be successful in things like this. But I'm seeing other people, like, doing things that make them successful, and I'm like, oh my god, what am I doing wrong? But at the same time, like this book has helped me realize like it just takes time, and you just have to keep working at it, even if it's going to be painful, and you don't think you should do it anymore. Where everybody else pretty much starts out way after you and are doing far better. And yeah, it's okay. It's sorry, I don't want to talk about like failure. Otherwise, like it's gonna bring me back to the envy video I just did or did last video. And another thing that I actually like about this book is like it talks about like how even the best artists actually have struggled with creativity. Like for an example, like Questlove talks about a musician called D'Angelo, and he put his all into his first album, like every single part of his soul, like all of his soul, and he wrote, recorded, produced music, and he traveled all over the place to promote this album. And then when it came to his second album, he just hit a standstill. Like he didn't know what to create. Like he put his whole like all into it, and then it's like, oh my god, what next? I can't think of anything. Like he describes D'Angelo as like constantly creative. Like he's creative inwards, but he can't like get it out because it's probably not good enough. And so Questlove ended up suggesting like, if you're a musician or anything, or if you're a writer, just write a sentence, like write the same sentence. Like for example, if you're a musician and you like want to, what's it called, play something, just play anything creative, like anything that exists. Like, I don't know, play "Give It Away" by the Red Hot Chili Peppers for my example, and you just keep playing on bass, and then you like think of something while you're playing, and then it just kind of grows and grows and grows, and that's exactly what happened. Like a couple of days ago, I was playing along with a jazz rap instrumental on my bass, and then it just kind of came to me. And later on, I'm gonna record something on. I'm just gonna record this because I'm gonna practice a little bit more, and I'm just gonna record it. So and put it on, I don't know, SoundCloud or this channel or something. I don't know. But yeah, I honestly recommend. And it actually, and that advice actually does help. Just like copy it. Don't release it because that's plagiarism. Just copy, or like if you're a writer, write a chapter or a sentence of a pre-existing book. If you're a musician, play along with a pre-existing song. If you're an artist, just draw along with a pre-existing picture, and it'll pretty much come to you because it just happens to come to you at times. Like it's like, okay, how can I make something like this? Like make something like this, and that's what D'Angelo did. He just like made other things. Like he just recreated a few songs, not on his next album, but like to like get something out there, and eventually like his creativity juices flowed, and that's how he kind of created the second album. And again, this book actually delves into like creative processes. Like he talks about how chefs create and musicians and DJs and whatnot. And he talks about his own struggles with like his creativity in terms of his musical career and how he bounced back. And he pretty much advises don't give up, like, don't procrastinate. Just keep creating, even if you're stuck. Like, if you're stuck on something, work on something else that's completely out of your comfort zone. And even though this is a library book, I'd actually want to buy it. I I would recommend this to anybody who is going into like art or anything creative or just needs inspiration, because again, I'd recommend this book, but I recommend like if you are a creative person and you just want to get out there and you just need that extra push, this is the book for you. It's the book for me. I read this twice, and when my New Year resolution halfway through the year is completed, I will find and buy this book along with that um, cut that cake and puppets book. I will recommend this. Again, recommend this to anybody who's suffering from creative burnout or creative inspiration, who wants creative inspiration, because it'll help. He knows what he's talking about. He's been in this thing for years. He doesn't talk about music. He talks about every aspect. Again, writing, art, like cooking food, teaching, and like just being a creative person throughout. So again, I recommend this book. I recommend the rest of these books I've read, and yeah, man, over like I can't believe this is probably the longest books I've read video I've done. So until next week, where I recommend or talk about books that I've read, I will see you soon.